Welcome to the High Tech Freedom Podcast. This is a podcast where we bring successful tech sales professionals, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs to share best practices, insights, and lessons learned with other tech sales professionals. As a sales professional, the more we learn, the more we earn. Once we earn it, how can we put those hard-earned commission dollars back to work to build additional income streams that will create the freedom we are all working to achieve? I'm your host, Chris Freeman. I'm a high-tech sales leader, real estate investor, and lifetime learner. Well, Jesse, welcome to the High Tech Freedom Podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing good. You know, the sun's out. It's supposed to be a warm day. I'm excited to be in Oregon.
Yeah, it's warm. I think it's going to be in the 90s. So hopefully you've got some AC there. Why don't we jump right into it? Why don't we start off with a little bit about how you got into the sales profession?
Well, I think I could probably go on for 30 minutes on that one. So I'll try to do the highlights here. So, you know, if you really go back to, I would say high school days, I was always a sports and competitive person growing up, even before that on the tournament teams. And really just, I guess my whole life was around winning and playing sports and being competitive. And you know, of course, there's the school aspect of getting good grades so that you can continue playing and not in trouble with the parents. So, you know, I think from there, and then when I got into the next phase, which was college, I really that all went away, the winning. I mean, I didn't play college sports. I wasn't really interested in intramural because I thought it was just you know, the guys going and running around. It wasn't really competitive. And I was good at math in high school and PE. So I wasn't going to be a PE teacher. And that math thing was like, all right, I guess I'll do engineering because there was construction involved. And I had friends' parents that were around the construction industry more on an ownership level. So they had big machineries and dirt bike tracks and, you know, the cool stuff. I was like, I could do that. Right. So I went down the path of engineering in college and quickly realized that the business students had a lot more fun than the engineering students in college. But, you know, a lot of those business students going into sales. And, you know, it was the first time in my life, too, that I got around a pretty diverse set of people, you know, men and women that, you know, came from different backgrounds. I came from a small town of Kaiser, Oregon, Kaiser Salem. I mean, it's not that diversified. And most of the people either worked for, you know, a small business around town or the state, you know, or the hospital. So income wise, everyone's pretty, you know, in a similar bubble. I got to college and I got around crazy true wealth, which blew my mind, you know, fraternity brothers that were billionaires, their parents were billionaires to millionaires. And I'm like, whoa, this is, you know, life's a lot bigger. And so I wasn't going to turn back. I'm a finisher. So when I start something, I finish it. So I finished schooling in 4 years with my engineering degree and a minor in business. I went straight into working for Turner Construction, which is a large, top 5 largest construction companies in the world. My first internship before I graduated, I realized that this wasn't the job or the career for me. But again, I'm a finisher. I'm going to go do this. And so I was like, hey, if I got that degree that says engineer, I can go figure this out after I get a job and whatnot. So I got in, you know, was an engineer / moved my way to project management. Really was there for 5 years for working for Turner Construction out of college. So for me, that was, you know, a long time and that stint. But the behind the scenes is that for 2.5 years of that, I was interviewing to get into sales. That's the crazy thing is that, so about 2.5 years into working as an engineer, project manager, I got around a couple individuals that were in sales, you know, and I met them through my sister who were friends with them. And I was like, you have money, you have a good marriage, you got kids, you have pretty autonomous schedule. I'm like, what do you guys do? And they're like, oh, I'm in sales. I'm like, what do you mean you're in sales? And both of them happen to be in office supply sales. So printers, copiers, phones, you know, stuff like that, which was a different world for me. But I was at the time working at Salem Hospital in construction. And I also knew a couple of people that were in medical sales. And so I was like, you know, I'm going to get into medical sales because I know the hospital grounds. I know those guys make a lot of money and, you know, it seems like a pretty interesting role. And so really through mentorship, getting around the right people is how I got into sales. At the same time, I was introduced to a business that was in network marketing called Amway and the Worldwide Group. So that, I guess, mentorship and introduction into owning a business. Now, and a lot of people think different things around that industry and by true nature, but if you get around the right people and it's a really legit business model, you learn how to grow your own business and also sales. So you took that mindset mentality. I was like, how do I take that into the world of sales? And so it took me 2.5 years, but I finally got into medical sales. And from there, it was a whole mind blowing improvement from a career in engineering, working 50 hours a week. And they would joke that that's half a week. 100 is a full week, and getting paid salary. Like, so the more I work, the less I actually made in essence on an hourly basis. And then all of a sudden I get into sales. I'm like, the more I work, the more I get paid, and like it gets accelerators and like I'm like, this is the life for me. Like I'm winning, I'm competitive. I want, it's fun to me. So that's, I guess, how I got into sales. And it wasn't an easy road, but when I got there, I just used personal development to really dig in and succeed.
Yeah. Well, sales is a beautiful thing. And, what's interesting there is you were seeking it out. So you knew you got the engineering degree, you were seeking out sales, took a little bit of time. I'm really curious about the Amway piece of it. So, I think you and I had talked earlier, you did that for about 6 years and actually had built up a pretty good business, generating some really nice annual income from that business that, then all went, basically it all crumbled once the pandemic hit because nobody could go meet with anybody, do anything, sell anything in people's homes and so on. But I'm curious, how did your experience doing that impact how you sold business to business professionally in your W-2 career?
It 100% correlated because, if you think of sales and I guess the traditional stigma of sales, like, oh, you're in sales, you're that used car salesman or whatever, right? Like, well, if you're that used car salesman, again, I'm not trying to make bad there, but you're probably not that good at what we do in sales and software or tech sales because it doesn't work. We're not transactional. There's a lot of pieces to our sales process. Same exact thing. If you took that into the Amway profession, and I actually learned it from Amway first. They taught really how to go into meetings, have a whole process. And we used a 4 to 5 step process to put someone through an evaluation process or a learning process to learn about the Amway business with Worldwide Group, to really vet out, one, if they're going to be serious, and two, if I'm going to waste my time or spend my time with them because they weren't paying me, right? Like the only thing that business actually operates is if they're successful, then I'm successful. If they're not, then I'm not, right? And so in that relationship of financial, I guess, connection is that I really vetted out or really interviewed the people that I wanted to work with. And so it's really the same thing in software sales. I mean, I'm not vetting out the people I want to work with in this aspect, but it is a process that I call the last 4 or 5 years, maybe longer, 7 years, the Challenger sale, which is teach, tailor, and take control. Well, they were already teaching me that in Worldwide Group and Amway, which is the teach, tailor, take control, but we didn't call it the Challenger sale, right? Ultimately, we didn't say we were salesmen in Amway. It was more leadership, mentorship, but it was so similar that I was like, I just need to transition this into sales. And that's why I was seeking out sales because I was first started Amway, I was still working as an engineer at Turner. I was like, I need to use these skills. I'm learning these skills and I'm not getting paid.
Yeah. I love it. Well, I think I've shared this on earlier podcast interviews, but my first sales job was doing the Cutco cutlery, selling knives, going home to home, doing that. And again, it's transactional. But what I learned about owning your own business, having to self-motivate yourself when you don't want to do it, having to get on the phone, call referrals, set up appointments. Initially for me, that was terrifying, but I learned a little bit of, just self-management, which then carried me on into my own sales career. So
you think about what you're doing there, like you just learned to be self-disciplined or, accountable to yourself or whatever that is that like just carries through.
Well, so talk to me a little bit. You mentioned sales process. So fast forward a little bit. Now you've been working, been in sales leadership. When you think about a sales process and what you do now or some of the other roles, What are some of the key components in your sales process that have just traditionally have led to success?
Yeah, I mean, there's really, to me, the sales process, one, you have to understand it. So for me, I'm a pretty simple visual person. So you can take any sales, medic, challenger, whatever, and there's some good sales and pieces of each. And then you got to find what fits within you. But again, it's all about the simplicity and not making it complex so that you can understand it. So for me, it's always about an agenda, an upfront contract. An upfront contract is setting the stage of like whatever that agenda is. When we're done, I'm either going to say we're not moving forward because it doesn't fit, or you can tell me. It's setting the stage, and then being able. I think a big piece is being able to, throughout that meeting. Most meetings we take an hour to 2 hours with a prospect, is being able to pull out their critical business issues and then find what that next action plan is, right? What that next step is. And I think a lot of sellers miss that piece, or they're not able to pull out what that next piece is to drive this forward. They might get to the end of the meeting and be like, wow, that was a great meeting, Mr. Customer. We got boom, 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 boom. What would you like to do next? That's not the question. The question is, here's what we're going to do next, right? It's not a question, it's a statement. Do you agree or not, right? And I think a lot of sellers just either miss that part, or they're still learning how to build that into their conversation during the meeting.
Yeah, so you want to naturally pull that out during the conversation. So, Jesse, what are some examples, or maybe, I guess, things that maybe you do to pull out those specific next steps or customer committed action items during the call?
Yeah, I mean, for one, you got to be prepared. So you go into that meeting 100% prepared, both on the person and the company and the situation of the opportunity, so that you already have a predefined next step that you think, right? If you're going into a discovery meeting, most likely your next step's a demo, but hey, maybe it's not. So you got to be able to pivot and just not be rigid. Same thing, demo, what's after a demo? Or maybe it's a technical demo, or maybe it's an IT assessment, or maybe it's pricing, and so you got to be predefined and organized so that you're ready for that next step. And then I think the other part of that is I use I look at over here because I'm using a different computer, but my monitor has 5 questions taped to it. And it's simple that I can ask almost every meeting. And it's, Mr. Buyer, what's your buying process, timelines to get around that? Why are you considering the solution? What could possibly stall this out? Who's all involved in this decision, right? So it's questions that you can ask, but it's about how you ask them so that they keep the guard down and also keep more people involved. Because most time in our organizations, we're not selling to just one person. We're selling to decision-making units, right? And executive buyers. And you can't just be like, well, are you the final signer? Should I be talking to you or not? You can't do that, right? Like, hey, who's all involved? Like, you got a big company. You might be making this decision all by yourself, but is there anyone else involved in that? Oh yeah. And then they list out 4 or 5 people. So it's one thing to take the teaching. It's another thing to apply it to a situation that is conversational too.
Yeah, I actually have a solo episode coming up similar to that topic. It's talking about finding the pain, but the big, I think a real key component to successfully doing that is the ability to be curious in how you ask your questions. And, you don't always have to have an agenda every time you ask a question, right? I mean, sometimes you're asking a question and you don't know where it's going to go, but, what you're trying to do is uncover more information so you can uncover deeper business pain, maybe people that you didn't know about, maybe things that could positively or negatively impact your deal. But sometimes, you go in so much with a preset agenda, you know what you want, but that doesn't matter. It's what does the customer want? What problems are they having? And that's what you really have to kind of fixate around.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think now in the space that I'm in with environmental health and safety, with a ESG, environmental social governance, it's certainly a newer space for me, and it's so wide. So that genuine curiosity, I'm asking, with my reps, with customers, I generally am like, what did you just say? Like, what are you talking about? Like, there was no agenda to that other than I just wanted to learn. But a lot of times me doing that actually uncovers like, oh, that was really important to them. I missed that because I had no idea what they're talking about because they use, 4 acronyms in one sentence. But
the world of acronyms.
Before we jump into the topic, I wanted to let you know that we just launched a monthly drawing for one of our insulated high-tech Freedom tumblers. Now, I've been sending these out as a thank you gift to each of our guests, and the response has been great. Everyone has a full-size coffee cup, a Yeti, or whatever brand that they might use, but not everybody has the small tumbler that you can put your wine or beverage of choice in. And they're great for the deck, beach, camping, or just keeping your drink warm or cold. Now, I'm not selling these, but I am excited about them. So we decided to offer these up to the loyal podcast listeners by doing a monthly drawing. So if you're interested, go to hightechfreedom.com/mug, that's MUG, and you'll see a picture of the tumbler and you can enter. We'll just collect your name, phone number, and email. And if you do win, we'll then follow up and ask for your mailing address so we know where to send it. If you don't win, your name stays in, so you don't need to re-enter.
Well, so Jesse, we might have touched on a few of these, but when you think about some of the people that you've worked with, some of your team members or reps that you've managed, some of the top performers, what are you seeing right now that separates the top 10, 20% of reps from the rest of the pack?
I think there's a few aspects that separate them. One is we already touched on that, and that's that self-discipline. I certainly am not a micromanager. I'm not calling my reps on a daily basis just to check in on certain aspects. So they're driving their deals forward by their own self-discipline. I think they have a really good ability to have a challenger sale, which, whether you call a challenger or you just say they know how to teach, tailor, and then take control of that evaluation by having that plan in place and being able to adjust and or pivot when needed, because it's ultimately up to the customer, but you still have to drive it. Right. You can put that customer in the passenger seat, but you're still driving it. And then I think lastly is creating it simple, but making sure they have all the information, making sure that they can get all the information in that evaluation out to them, because confused buyers don't buy. And I think one thing that I taught, my first sales team is I went into it, they were underperforming, and I realized that a lot of them were confused. They were confused going into maybe an ROI meeting or a proposal meeting. I'm like, how are you confused on the price? How are you going to go sell this if you are confused right now? And I saw that so much. And I'm like, so what I learned is that through coaching, is that every time I went in as an individual seller, I sold it to myself, and I got like mentally or, bought into the deals. Like, oh no, you know what? I can see why they'd buy this now. So that's how I got it simple or mental buy-in. And so I start teaching my reps, like, hey, if you can't sell this to yourself, there's no way you're selling it to a prospect or a customer. Like, it's just not happening. And so I think those are the four things I think that separate them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you're not buying into it, if you're not believing it, if you're not confident, that's going to show through with your customer. How can you be enthusiastic and passionate about something, in front of the customer if you don't feel it? Yeah. So. Well, Jesse, you've been working now for a little while. You're still earlier in your career, at least relative to me. If you were to go back and look at maybe talk to the younger Jesse 10 years ago, if you were to tell him to do something different, something better, what career advice would you give yourself?
Oh man, this one actually hurts me. It still does. So I literally love everything that I learned from the Amway worldwide business. Truly had it changed my whole entire trajectory of my life. But one thing that they just were not honed in on, or they really strayed away from, was real estate. And at the time I was coming out of college, it was 2012. So I was 22 years old. I was making 60, 70 grand as an engineer. Yeah, I had crazy student loans. But I was living, with 4 other guys in a rental. I totally could have saved and put money into a house. And at that time in 2012, 2013, 2014, you still were buying houses that were 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square feet for less than 200 grand, or right around it, at least where I live. And I had probably 3 friends that did that, one, like 2 were police officers. One was, something else, like, again, not making crazy amount of money, but they had enough to get in. And I'm like, I so could have done that. And then I wish it would have took off my trajectory on the real estate, because I always wanted to be in real estate, but I just really put a pause on it because I was really focused on getting in sales and also focused on, the Amway business. So, maybe doing too much, but in general, Amway really didn't want to cater. They wanted to cater to the masses, and a lot of people weren't in that same situation to me as far as some teachings. So I wish I would have just, I guess, take the blinders off and dove into real estate way sooner in my career, for sure.
Yeah, it's hard because if an early career person hasn't been exposed to different ideas, it's hard for you to see 20, 30 years down the road on how things could be different. And, that is, so, I've been doing real estate for 20 plus years. And it's one of the beauties of real estate is, long term, it's a great way to build wealth, but you have to be thinking long term. And there's a lot of people out there that want to jump in and do something quick and get rich quick. And, it just never works out for the most part. So if you're interested as a listener in learning more about real estate, drop me a note. You can go to our website, hightechfreedom.com, connect up with me there. We have a newsletter that I send out, every week or 2 weeks about different real estate topics. So you can check that out. Well, Jesse, so as you were progressing through your career, what about, as you were moving up the ranks within different companies, any lessons learned around building your brand, building your personal brand, kind of moving up to that next step of sales leadership?
Yeah, I got a good story and a bad one, I guess, in as far as my personal brand. So as I mentioned early on, is that my first actual sales job was in medical sales. And so I was in the OR every day, 6 a.m. And I was actually teaching doctors how to use devices or medical devices on patients for the first time, right? So that's a whole different world than this high tech or, software sales world. So actually, when I got that job, I came from construction again. I was behind my computer all day, emailing, 100, 200 emails a day, 50 calls a day. I went from that to, they didn't even give me a computer in medical sales. They're like, here's your iPad. We'll pay for your cell phone bill. You need to be in the OR every single day. So I went from like that 100 emails a day on minimum to like 10. So, and it was like all hands on deck. Sales reps at this company was, if I needed something and I was out in the field, aka I was in a hospital and I needed something, I text my boss, I text product support, and like I had it fast. Like it was like, again, we were all hands on deck for salespeople because it was also urgent a lot of times too. So that was my first sales experience. And then I was like, okay, and the only reason I left, I loved medical sales by all means, but I was living in Central Oregon, Bend, Oregon, and all my hospitals were about 3 to 5 hours away from each other. So to be in hospitals every single day means you have to travel, and you can't, just do that drive every morning. So I traveled over 250 nights a year doing that, and being newly married, it just wasn't going to work out if I wanted to stay in Bend. I could go live in Portland, but I didn't want to do that either. So anyway, so then I transitioned to software sales, and my first company there was in Bend. It was, the second largest employer, but software sales in Bend. And I jumped in. I was like, instantly got in. I was like, whoa, what am I in for? This company that just sold, like there was a lot of stuff going on. I would say startup, but I was going to make sales. Like it was totally different. I was flying people out to people. I was hitting the phones, the emails, back to that grind. But then, when I sold a deal, like I needed something, or in the sales process, I needed something. And I was like expecting all hands on deck for salesmen. And it was like, who are you? Like, we don't just give you anything, right? I mean, they do, but it was totally a different world of sales. And my expectation was here from medical to go into software sales. And it was a great company. I honestly, I still work with a handful of people from that company, really, really good people. But I certainly ruined my brand there, I would say, because I was came in with an attitude that was like, sales is gold here. If I need something, you drop everything for me, right? Like, and if you mess it up, like you got to fix it, and you got to do it now. Like I remember I had to sit down with someone and like say sorry because hurt their feelings, and it was my fault for sure.
Well, that's actually it's a really good lesson learned, because let's say you're interviewing for a job, right? Not all companies are sales friendly. right? Some companies are more engineering centric. Some companies are more marketing and sales centric. Some companies, sales really drive, the company and the strategy and kind of the big picture. And in other companies, it's engineering and sales is said, hey, go make it happen. So, you have to know yourself, you have to know your style, you have to know your process, where you can fit. But, and when you're interviewing for those types of jobs, it's a good thing to explore so you know what you're getting into.
Well, you go look at the C-suite. Who's the CEO and who's the COO? Because a lot of times that's a sales organization if those guys were previous CROs or VPs of sales, right? Because that is a path a lot of times. So then those are sales-driven organizations. Or if that CEO is a product engineer from his past, or it's something along those lines, then it might be a little more operational, more engineering based. And so that is what I took from that company, and the learnings and the failures, but also the successes there. I was like, okay, when I go interview for my next software sales job, what is it that I'm passionate about, right? Or know a lot about? And is this a true sales organization where I can dive in and they're going to support me 100%? And that's what I did after that. And from there on, I was like all about building a brand. And ever since I've been in sales. So since, when I left engineering, I was in a remote-based sales world. I guess I was in office for about a year, but outside of that, it's been remote. So building your brand via remote is a lot different than being in an office, for sure. I mean, you can't just send, team chats or Slack messages snarky. Like, people are going to read that the wrong way.
Yeah, for sure.
So you got to do it differently. Yeah. So I definitely learned and taken that the rest of my career. It's been like, hey, Jesse's great to work with. Yes, I want to work with Jesse. Oh, a sales engineer wants Jesse on the deal because he's going to come prepared, organized. He's going to be respectful. So as long as you can take your failures and turn them into positives, for sure.
Yeah. And that's, as a remote salesperson, and a lot of us are in the tech world, but it's important to remember that it's still a people business and it's still about relationships. And so one of the things I've always tried to do, I'm not perfect at it, but one of the things I've always tried to do is if I'm going back to the corporate office or going to like a regional office, I always try to set aside a little extra time on my trip to try to meet up with some of the people that are in the office, because it's not that often that you get face-to-face with them, maybe at the sales conference, right? Maybe at QBR, but it just doesn't happen that often. So when you can get them in the office, maybe get out and have a cup of coffee, go grab lunch with them, it completely changes the dynamics of the relationship you have with those corporate resources. As we wrap it up, so I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and I saw that you used to be a RAF guide for some nonprofit organizations. And I'm always impressed with just how generous really successful people are with giving back. But tell me a little bit about what you do to give back. And are you still rafting?
Ironically, yes. I have a piece of paper back here on the next raft trip that I was sending out this summer. So that is a passion driven by my father. So my father, also pretty much my hero, but he does not come from sales by any means, but he has a background of giving back and drug and alcohol abuse counseling and all kinds of stuff. And so he actually, Travoy LLC is his company, and he's run that since well before I was alive. And so when I was young, I got to go and help out and volunteer and whatnot. And then as I got older, I just continued that trend. And so I still get to help him with a couple of raft trips a year, whether that's a church group, a Boys and Girls Club, or one of his favorite is taking mentally handicapped. So a lot of people with Down syndrome. He was one of the first. He's been over on the Street River. So my dad's in his 70s, turned 74 this last month. So he's still rafting in 74, to give you perspective. He did his first Ironman at 50, and Ironman is a really big triathlon, if you don't know what that is, or to the listeners. So needless to say, he's very active, and he's 100% has the biggest heart and gives back. And I just learned it from him. And when I told him when I was going into sales, he said I was nuts, but he thinks it's fine now.
Well, that's awesome. Well, nice work. Well, Jesse, I really appreciate your time today. Nice getting to know you. If somebody would like to reach out to you, we'll have your LinkedIn connections in the show notes. Is that the best way, or do you have another preferred way?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn's probably the best. I could give an email, but quite frankly, everyone messages via LinkedIn now anyway, and I'm pretty responsive there too. So if anyone wants to get a hold of, hit me a direct message on LinkedIn, and happy to respond.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks again for joining us today. To get more sales and real estate tips, you can subscribe to our newsletter at hightechfreedom.com. You can also join our private Facebook and LinkedIn group that is exclusively for sales professionals. If you found a nugget of good information in the podcast, please subscribe, give us a positive rating, and write a review. If there is a topic that you would like us to cover in the future, please send us a note through our website at hightechfreedom.com. Until next week, make this your best week ever.